Yeah, let me know if you guys see that okay.
We can get it to the PowerPoints. There you
Yep.
go.
Hey folks, so Christian Bermudez here. I am new to the Choice Solutions team around started back in April, but I been around the industry for about 18 years. Been doing EUC, IGEL for about 10 plus years. Had a stint there for a little bit as a solution architect. So excited to be here today. Um, Definitely have a background in fintech. I do see some old customers on here and current customers on here, so I appreciate you guys joining. We do have a very special guest today, Mr. Jason Trunk, Field CTO for Island. Jason, if you want to give yourself an introduction and give yourself a couple minutes here.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Thanks everybody for joining today. Field CTO at Island here, been here for 4 years. Very happy to show you what this is all about. It's a new space. It's an emerging space. I come from banking as well. I didn't realize you were going to mention that, Christian, but I was a former executive director at JPMC. I looked after telemetry and monitoring for the whole consumer bank. So yeah, we've definitely had a lot of experience with thin clients. Can't wait to show you what we're doing here with IGEL.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. So what is iGel? I know a couple of you guys know what it is, but what it isn't. But iGel is a Linux-based OS, very thin, very light. It is a read-only OS, which makes life a little easier when it comes to management of that OS, when it comes to any type of ransomware attacks, any type of AV agents, any type of XDR stuff that's going out there. They have done a really good job of taking a CentOS based kernel and customizing it to enhance the user experience. Whether it's for OS, for tap and go in the healthcare environment, and simple access to Citrix and financial institution way, a couple different things we can go from there. One of the big things about iGel to see or keep in mind is that it does help reduce TCO. We're seeing about 75% ish help reduce the surface attack that we see with ransomware. Unfortunately, I just did currently a ransomware restore here recently, and it was pretty rough to get the customer back up, and they were out a couple of weeks. So definitely takes that away from them. Also, what we're seeing is the use of going to Windows 11. Whether it's a strategy that they move into the cloud and use something like Cloud PC, or they're using something like Citrix or Omnissa going down that path. The other big one that we've seen as well is that it allows you to sort of keep the e-waste and ability to keep old hardware around, which makes life pretty easy there. So the three big benefits that have been broken down for iGel. The first one is they are moving now into more being a security-based company, not just an endpoint thin client company. So they've broken down to this thought process of being a preventive uh, security model, which allows them to basically be diverse in the environment of what they're trying to do, whether they're trying to do hardware endpoint, where they're trying to be, isolated with specific use cases, whether it's a user inside the four walls, whether it's a user outside the four walls. We have the ability to do a lot of that. The other benefit is financial, like I mentioned, the TCO models. The average cost per device for, say, for example, Windows 11 device today, $1,000 give or take. What we're seeing in the thin client world, it brings it down, a good 60% of that cost. And the last part is the manageability part. That's the big piece I interact with a lot. I try to simplify and everybody who's worked with me in the past or has done work with me, they understand that engineering standards is a big one for me. Optimizing the user experience is a big one for me, and then automating the enhancements or the thought process of how we deploy and manage the device is another big one for me. So going back to the security preventive model, one big thing it's the trying to do is it's secure by design, right? It's read only. They have a modular design when it comes to how you run the applications, whether it's the base OS with ancillary applications getting loaded into it, whether we're adding a Citrix workspace, whether we're adding a Island browser, whether we're adding a Chromium browser. It allows us to sort of understand what can be put directly on the device and who owns that thought process. Um, from the partnerships perspective, we're seeing a huge involvement. For example, like Island, like Palo Alto is the latest one that just got thrown in. Zscaler just got thrown into the mix as well. So we're seeing a good amount of big technology partners accept the IGEL OS and become sort of a thought process now in the solution, which is part of the reason we're here today. So one big thing we'll probably cover here at the end of this, when Jason does his presentation, is the adaptive secure desktop, to sort of how we can take the IGEL device and make it our daily day driver. From an manageability perspective, one big benefit from a IGEL perspective is that it's easy to stand up, easy to get registration going. It's simply a DNS record. Automatic enrollments we can get going for whether a device company or company has 100 devices or 1,000 devices. We can do set delivery rules for when the device hits the UMS. We can go ahead and put those in specific placements for directories, which allows us to do sort of a zero-touch integration with deployment and getting those devices ready to go from, boot up to fully configured within a 5 to 10 minute range. So definitely cuts back on time as we see like a Windows 11 rollout, where when onboarding could take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. The UMS is available with on-premise, and they have just added a newly feature with UMS as a service, which is hosted in AWS, which is something I'm excited about because when I worked at IGEL, it was a big ask for our customers there. So one nice thing about this is rolling into some of the enterprise devices or enterprise customers I had is that the amount of FTE to manage IGEL is pretty slim. So technically, they're seeing that every one FTE can manage about 20,000 devices. So that's been a big one for us, where you see sometimes having endpoint teams having 4 or 5 guys who's managed 400 devices. So that's been a big piece for us. Some of the high value cases, shared workstations, as Jason mentioned, we came from banking, so we've seen that definitely there. Healthcare has been another big one for us. Retail and manufacturing, having these guys out on the floors there. Back office workers, call centers. With these latest crisis that we had with COVID a couple years ago, remote workers became a huge thing. I think when I worked during COVID, I was actually at IGEL, and that was probably the busiest I've ever been. We probably deployed a good 70,000 work from home devices during that first couple of months. So that was pretty crazy. And then they have some new technologies coming out with digital experience. So sort of a self-service kiosk, digital signage like you guys see at the airport, tracking boards when you walk into a hospital and you see the Epic, what's going on here, or if there's a surgery center going on, where they're at. So those are some of the pieces there. Some of the added features now they've done too lately has been the business continuity and disaster recovery, which I'll cover a little bit here in a slide. So my big gain from this conversation, I think today, is going to be the adaptive secure desktop is where we utilize the IGEL OS to be sort of our native daily driver and go away from that Windows thought process where we don't necessarily need to have a Windows device if we don't have legacy apps that are installed locally. So some of the breakdown here is going to be from a VDI perspective, our usual, right? Amazon Workspaces, Omnissa, AVD, Citrix, traditionally RDS, WorkSpot, Frame, and Chasm. From the browser perspective, we have the Islands, the Edge, Citrix, New Spa, Firefox, and Chromium. The next one's going to be progressive web apps. So actually taking some of the web apps that are native to O365 and delivering them directly on, making them look like they're installed. Some native apps, PowerShell, Nuance, Zoom, Improvata, which has been a big one for IGEL, which they actually been co-developing the agent now to help use cases in the healthcare space. And the latest new one is going to be the hypervisor perspective, where you can run legacy VMs or legacy or even your Windows 11 VM within the IGEL OS as a local hypervisor. So hosted desktop apps, as we know, are the traditional thought processes, right? So that's what we've seen it be. It's what IGEL sort of started their whole mark on. So logging into Citrix, logging into Omnissa, logging into AVD. It's been sort of the thought process many moons ago, but as we've seen the progression of the OS and also of applications and the environments get better, I think we now see a whole new thought process on how we can deliver a desktop for an end user. On the browser space, I'm excited to have Jason here. I saw Island about 2 years ago at Now and Next, and ever since then, I think it's been one of the best products or new browsers on the market that allows some flexibility along with the security and delivery of sort of a custom and usable user experience for users, where they sort of get everything delivered directly there. And we'll have a little bit more details there when Jason goes into his piece. Progressive web apps. Everybody knows what progressive web apps now in the Windows 11 world. One nice thing about IGEL is that it takes it away from the user to create that progressive web app and allows us as the management side deliver it for the user from that perspective, right? So we can sort of make it look and feel like it's part of the OS, but it can be customized to the end user, and we can go down that path. Some of the IGEL native apps, which I'll mention here, these are the progressive web apps, right? So we're seeing the Outlooks, the Excels, the Words, the Teams, all the daily drivers that people use today if they have the O365 stack. On the native web apps, this is the big one, right? The IGEL has over about IGEL environment or IGEL ready program has about 100 different applications that can get brought in. When I started, I would say maybe there's about 12. So definitely the thought process there has increased the ability to have an IGEL ready program and reach out to the ecosystem, for example, like folks like Island, to bring this in and show us has been huge and tremendously big for the IGEL OS and thought process there. The other big piece is that you can also do customer apps, which they have a custom app packaging portal now. So for those of you who have done IGEL in the past, no more custom partitions, rah rah shish boomba. That used to be a nightmare. So, but yeah, and any new use cases you can think of. I mean, if we can run on Linux, we can most likely get it running on IGEL. This is a new one, the managed hypervisor, right? So for example, folks who have some of those legacy Windows XP or Windows 7 or even old school Windows Server apps that need to be ran on a old OS, we can actually capture that image and run it locally on a IGEL, as long as the hardware can support the sizing that we need for that VM to run on it. So that's a big one. I definitely would like to have an office hours around this one. So we'll definitely go into that one there and on office hours. So yeah, just a little thought process there. Nice part about it is controlled by the UMS, so images can get inputted to the UMS. They get downloaded from the UMS, and we can go ahead and push those there. The big one for that one, also to make note on in Windows 11, it does replace the TPM module that you'll need from a traditional thick client. We can do a virtual TPM there, which is huge. So. Back to the business continuity pieces here. This is the new function and feature sets that are coming in from IGEL. We just saw this a couple of weeks ago at their Now Next, is where we have the traditional installation of IGEL OS being installed locally. We've had the fully bootable called the UD Pocket, which was great during COVID. But now they are adding a couple more, right? Which is going to be the dual boot mode, right? Where you have Windows running, but if you need a failover to IGEL to just get to a generic app or to get to a generic virtual desktop that maybe is Intune joined, you now have that ability to do that. And then again, the local hypervisor that's been created. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over here to Jason in a couple seconds here. One of the big pieces I love about this is the interaction that you have with the desktop, and Jason will go into some details about how that beats down, but we have it built out with Intra ID internally for our namesake here internally. So I have a IPA, which is a Island Private Access connector internally for us. So I'm able to utilize everything that I have back in our Kansas City office here at home in Boise, like I'm in the office, which has been great. But I appreciate everybody's time today. And then Jason, I'll hand it over here to you, bud.
All right. Thanks, Christian. I haven't heard rah rah shish kebab before. What does that mean? I haven't heard that one. That's a good one.
That was a no longer. So back in the day when we first started IGEL, we have to package applications with the Linux script and grab a custom partition and make an RBZ tool. So it used to be a nightmare. So it was more of our cheerleader squad there going, yay.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Very good. Well, let me just run through a couple of just to set up slides of really what we're all about. If nobody's heard of Island, that's fine as well. That we're 5 years old, so certainly not your fault. But it is a new space and it's a new concept for sure. And the reality is, we use this thing every day called a browser, and it's something that is free. We don't have any support for it. It is something that we just kind of showed up on our desktop one day. We started using it. And the question is, can you run your business from within a browser? But today it pretty much is being run through a browser. And of course, with Island, we're going to give you support. We have this fantastic user experience. We have all kinds of wonderful features built in, which I'll show you as well. And we're seeing a lot of large organizations move toward a fully managed operating system with obviously a fully managed browser running inside of it. And IGEL and Island, I can't think of a more perfect combination, especially for security and usability and manageability. There's just nothing close because here we have this fully functional, read-only, fully managed operating system with a browser that you have to sign into, because that's the identity part. So the identity comes with the browser. We link that to your identity provider, whatever that might be. And then of course, we've built out a full platform at this point. This is this is a browser that's controlled through centralized management, just like IGEL is. But the control is now what you're actually doing inside of the work, right? What you're doing as far as extensions and malware and DLP. We want to make sure DLP, the data doesn't leave the environment. So now you have this browser concept where you can make sure that the sensitive data that you don't want leaving and being copying and pasted over somewhere else, or maybe downloaded somewhere else and re-uploaded somewhere else, all of those boundaries are respected. And then, like Christian said, the networking, that's the big thing. So we've always really struggled with the networking, and that's why generally we go into VDI. Well, one of the reasons, but we generally go into VDI, Citrix, or Horizon, or whatever it might be. And a lot of these IGEL clients, that's basically their job, is to go into these environments. But it's because you got in there and then you had access to everything that you needed from a company perspective. But what if that networking was just built in local to the device, to the browser itself? And that's what we had to do. So we actually built in a full network that only Island can use, and that includes private access, that includes cloud, cloud proxy type access to your SaaS apps, and it immediately creates a closed loop system to Office 365 or Salesforce or Workday or whatever might have a lot of your sensitive data that you have in the cloud, that they're keeping it safe, and we know SSL is keeping the transport safe. But it's when it hits that consumer browser, whether it's in VDI, whether it's outside of VDI, that's where it gets decrypted. And at that moment, that data goes wherever it wants. And so that's where Island really starts to step in, is to say, okay, well, before we even show you that data, like, we're the browser, we show you things. That's the job of a browser, is to display content from a server, but we don't have to display that content if we think that you should not see it. If we think there's sensitive data there, we can make that decision in real time. Gartner believes that by 2030 that the enterprise browser will be the ubiquitous standard for end user compute. They think this is obviously where a lot of that work will be done. It makes sense. A lot of the apps are being built there. We're not building a lot of Power Builder apps anymore. Visual Basic, Clipper. I'm an old Clipper guy way back, from the Stone Age. But anyway, this is where it's at. It's really the browser. That's where the new apps are being developed. And of course, I invite you to go look at the Gartner Peer Insights reviews. These are your peers. These are CIOs and CISOs of a lot of organizations that they just can't get enough of Island, especially in the category that we were kind of pigeoned into, which is the SASE category, Security Services Edge category. There is no enterprise browser category. You probably don't have a budget for an enterprise browser, and that's fine. This is something that you would start to collaborate with your peers, and it would be something that would be kind of for everybody. And that's generally how we're doing our deals. Nobody really has a line item, although they're starting to. And so, we will talk about business continuity, disaster recovery. A browser is a good alternative for that. You can start to bring your systems back up slowly with Island. We can maybe get collaboration going and get, your SaaS properties safely accessed, even from systems that may not necessarily be on the network, or maybe BYO devices, to start to bring those up. And it really does represent a true zero trust approach. What I'll show you today is, this is true individualized access to an individualized resource. And that's not what VDI is, right? That's not what we've done historically with a fully managed laptop, for instance, right? If you have a fully managed laptop, you have one password, you get in, you get all your apps. If you have VDI, you get in, you get all your apps, you're on the network. A true zero trust approach is, limited access, one icon for one user, as long as your device is okay, as long as your network is okay, as long as you're from the right part of the world, then we'll let you in. And then we may not let you do all the functions of that application, which, by the way, can also be controlled at a browser level. So you think about that, could be extremely low, a low level of granularity to any of your key applications, including the presentation layer of those applications. So here's an example of the business continuity. You might have Citrix Workspace as an icon today in your IGEL. You might have Island as a backup, and potentially even a replacement of that in the future. But here's what it looks like. I'm going to also go to a live demo as well. This might be a homepage that you have in Island. And notice this is set up for kind of a workspace mode, we call it. Usually it looks like a browser. In this case, it doesn't. It looks just like a homepage, and you have your icons with all of your entitlements on there. You may want to pull up your Outlook, and that's going to pull up in a PWA. You might have other applications. I've got Teams going over there with Viva. You can open up, SSH prompts. You can open up your Salesforce, whatever it might be. This is the portal to all of those apps. But you might notice some of the data is obfuscated, right? This data is hidden down below because we decided to do that at that presentation layer. Teams works great natively through the browser. This is something that's always plagued, the VDI world, right? So what do? Well, we send everybody through VDI, which then egresses through US East 1, and then we have to worry about the audio and the video. So we have these helpers that get added on. So those go a different route, and then the VDI goes the other route. Well, none of that applies. Zoom, Teams, all of those just go natively to the closest server possible, right? So however fast the internet could get you there, that's how you egress, and that's the speed that you're going to expect with Island. So you really, with this zero trust concept, you give the users just what they need, nothing else. You're very specific about what they can access. And here you have this, fantastic operating system to run it on, to create just a fantastic overall end user experience. One of our co-customers together, they think that this is the ultimate manageability and protection at the endpoint. I can't think of a better overall tech stack, period. That's a very large life insurance company that you guys would all know of. And then this is a very large bank that everybody knows about, which is their global CIO said, can we island that? They're going around saying this throughout the bank because they're ready to get, they're done with Citrix and they're ready to move to a different experience, and they want to empower BYO. And changing this one thing, like just building a better client, changes everything. And that's really what we've done here with this technology. So with that, let me switch over to a live presentation. We'll kind of walk through some items here. All right, so I'll first show you, make sure this is the right screen here. Yeah, I'll first show you what our management console looks like. So this is Island. We have a lot of modules and features obviously built in here. One of the first things we might do is integrate with your identity provider, right? So this gets, Island itself integrated with your trust model, right? Your enterprise trust model, which could be Okta or Entra ID or PingFed or whatever it might be. We might also want to integrate with your SIM. So we might set up integration with any of your security event managers. This entire management console that you see here can be controlled through Terraform. It can be set up with role-based access control, very specific roles, because you may have users, you may have administrators on the network side that need to configure networking configurations, or desktop managers that need to come in. So we'll get back to some of these other areas in just a minute, but I did want to point out one of them is a brand new feature called Enterprise Communications. So this, we're not talking about Slack, but we're talking about a way to get large scale communications out to your field and out to your end users. It's a very nice way to, send data out and then create content that you can then, have your marketing team keep current or whatever it might be. And I'll show you what that looks like from an end user perspective. And then the other very new feature is digital experience monitoring. So this has always been, a challenge for organizations is, Sally's always complaining that the system is slow, right? Going to Salesforce is slow. Something's wrong, or this internal app doesn't behave well. Well, we have digital experience monitoring now to be able to look across, all of the applications in the whole estate and try to understand, well, which one of those applications is, slower than the other. So for instance, if I look across 100% of my users, Island is able to track 100% of all interactivity to 100% of all apps. Doesn't matter if they're internal apps or SaaS apps or, privately hosted apps. We might look across this data for, 4 weeks and maybe try to ascertain, which devices are slower. We're thinking about a new hardware upgrade. Well, which devices are performing best? Which networks, which connections are performing best? And then I might look at just overall adoption across these applications. How much usage am I really getting out of this cloud storage thing we just moved to? So now we can, break this down by users and by, platforms. How many devices are using, this application? And then of course, if there ever was any type of concern around the speed or, around the performance of the application, we can break down where that time was spent. And this is really where it starts to reduce the mean time to repair for issues that do pop up across any type of application. So we can see the DNS time and the TCP handshake time and all the things that basically none of the other vendors that are even in their own space that do this can do, just because they're relegated to waiting for a piece of JavaScript to load in the browser, which happens way after a lot of these events occur. So because we are the core browser, we can start to measure the performance across everybody all the time, as it's needed. And of course, if Sally continues to open tickets because maybe her machine is slow, we can then drill in even to her machine and start to look at what's going on. Does she have CPU problem? Is it memory? Is it a battery level or Wi-Fi signal or something like this that could indicate that there's an actual problem with her machine? But from an end user perspective, I'm going to show you this a couple ways. I've got a Windows machine here. I've got an IGEL machine loaded up over here as well. We can take a peek at. But from an end user perspective, you don't necessarily have to run only Island. You can have Chrome, you can have Edge on the same machine. But the reality is, if I launch Edge and I try to get to my Salesforce, and maybe I try to log in with this account that I know the password to, and get authenticated here, well, Salesforce is going to say no. You need the Island browser for that, right? So let me take you there. Let me bump you over to it, and we'll go ahead and open that up and give you that experience. And so I have a fictitious company here, JT Marlin. Notice that Island has launched, but instead of just going there, I do need to authenticate. So this is where we start to get redirected to your identity provider. So whether it's Intra ID, which is very popular, or Okta or Duo or PingFed, that's the login flow that you would expect to be taken to. So if I just put my credentials in here, there we go. Notice it's going to take me over to Entra ID, and I can get signed in. I'm actually already signed in. So this is what it might look like for kind of a first-time user to come in. They're going to have their homepage. All of their entitlements are here. If they want to launch their teams, here's that PWA. It's going to come up. You might notice the company logo is, emblazoned here in the background. That's because this is a browser canvas. We have control of the canvas. We can do whatever we want with the canvas. We can obviously protect the data as it's shown. We can put a help button where a help button doesn't exist. That little background image, just simple things like this. You control it all. If you don't want the chat feature, or if you don't want a button in Teams, well, you don't just call Microsoft and say, hey, would you mind taking off that meeting chats button? We never use it. Well, the browser can do that. We'll just take it off, right? We'll make it non-clickable. We'll put a big red X on it. Whatever you want to do, those are things that are in your control because you now control everything going in and out, including the screen. And that also includes things like file downloads. So if I want to restrict or maybe direct folks that need to work on files, I don't want my contractors putting those files on their C drive, right? So I'm going to either redirect them to one of our preferred locations in the cloud, or maybe I deny the whole thing altogether and give them a message as to why. And of course, we can do that dynamically based on things like device posture or the network that they're on, or any the part of the world that they're coming from, those types of things. So notice I've got my Outlook over here. I've got my my Teams over here. Obviously, this particular experience may not work for everybody. For instance, for those that need Excel, the thick client Excel. There's folks that need the thick client Excel with the add-ins and those types of things. But there's a huge population of users that could use this, right? They could use this Office 365 experience of Excel. Now, this happens to be a lot less expensive. This is the F3 license for Microsoft, right? So if you're looking at your Microsoft E3 and E5 and wondering how many, where I can make some changes, this might be a good start, because this experience is great. You get an icon on the bottom of your desktop. You could pin this, to the taskbar. Obviously, you're going to get the same thing in IGEL, but the reality is, this it could potentially be an alternative for a large swath of users. But I mentioned there was a network built in, and but before I do that, notice the messaging is over here. So these were the messages that I mentioned earlier. If you need to send out kind of large scale corporate messaging, we've just built that right into the homepage of the browser. If you also need to send breaking news or some sort of an emergency breakthrough, that's always going to be on the top here, so we can alert folks of maybe a network outage, or hey, don't open tickets for this. We know it's down, so just chill. And maybe we'll even take the icon off the desktop temporarily, so you're not tempted to go to that application, or maybe we put a big red X through it and tell you it's not available at the moment. But so anyway, this is completely customizable, but now you can see it looks and feels like a browser, right? I've got my URL bar. I have tabs up here. We just naturally know how to use it. What we've also done is we've built in within Island a fantastic ad blocker. This just comes native with the product. This works at the core of the browser. This is not a plugin. It's not an add-on. It's literally developed at the core of the Chromium code to make sure those ads don't come through. The interface indicates to the user, what mode they're in. Are they in a private browsing mode? Are they being monitored? Are they, what's being recorded? Because there are some cases where you might need to be GDPR compliant. You might need California privacy. They may be doing personal Gmail, and you don't want, a personal Gmail being observed. So, but they also might be doing corporate Gmail. So this is an example of corporate Gmail that just came up in a nice little window here. I know it's corporate because I see the logo. I understand that I can only do certain things in the personal Gmail. So if I pull up personal Gmail over here, let's get a different account here. Let's go to this other account. I'll sign into this one. And these are things that are really hard to do traditionally, even inside of Citrix environments, is we can't really delineate the difference. Can't understand the difference between personal Gmail and corporate Gmail. And the trouble there is just because the URLs are exactly the same. So on the network, it all looks the same, right? So the best we can do is to add a header and tell Google not to send back personal Gmail. And basically the result is you say no. You say no to your employees. You can't do personal stuff during business hours, like Instagram and Facebook and Gmail. But notice this does allow me to do it. It says, hey, this is personal browsing. This is not being monitored, but you might have different rules of what you can do, which makes sense, because if I have a file here that's a super secret file and I go to insert this into my personal Gmail, well, maybe that's not permitted. Maybe I need to request access for that. And in fact, we can route them through a workflow to let them go ahead and request access to do that. And this ties directly in with your ServiceNow. It ties in with your Slack. It's a very easy mechanism for them to create a ticket instead of trying to go open a ticket somewhere else. Now, here in my corporate Gmail or whatever it might be, I could take this super secret file and upload it to this one. So notice it uploads just fine. right? Because those are two totally different zones. They're treated completely separately, when it comes to those activities. So this also applies to things like AI. So because we have a full data loss protection engine built into Island, I may not want my users to put personally identifiable information into ChatGPT or Copilot or wherever it might be. So if I say, how's the weather in Dallas to Copilot, well, that's fine. All of that data went out, and it's going to answer my question for me. However, if I say, I'm Jason at island.io, well, that's an email address. So that's actually a personally identifiable piece of information. So notice it blocked me from even finish typing it, right? It literally deleted it from my typing, never went out to Copilot and never left the computer, never got on the network. So that same type of logic applies if we even have files. So if I have a document here, let's say that has some text in it, I could drop a file in it and notice this file just uploaded. Okay. So this thing just uploaded. I could say, what's in this file? And notice that Copilot did receive it and looked inside the file, and it says it has one word. It says hello. And sure enough, that's exactly what's in that file. However, I've got another file that says hello and it has a credit card number in it. But this is the type of data that I don't want accidentally put into large language models. And so the Island engine is going to scan that upload and make sure that it doesn't get anywhere. And in this case, notice that I was not able to get that file into AI. So this is the way to control sensitive data going in and out of these large language models, is to make sure it just never leaves the protected workspace of the enterprise browser. There's plenty of other ways and use cases that we can deal with AI as well. We actually have AI built into the browser. We've had this forever. We have an AI assistant that's linked to your AI engine. We can either bump people directly over to it, and it just sits here as part of the browser itself. We've got agentic AI built in so that we can run scripts and we can run workflows that do fantastic things inside the browser. Some of these things they stop and wait for you to do things, right? So they may, prompt for a contact name, do some things, and then wait for you to insert something, and then it goes and does the rest. And of course, it's able to move data from one screen to a new screen. So, this is unbelievably powerful to have that agentic AI built in. The other thing we've done is we've built a full password manager into the browser. So again, if you think about all the solutions that you've got with all of this technical debt, surrounding your systems, your ZTNA systems, your CASBs, your SASE, maybe VPNs. Maybe you guys are still using VPNs. You might have a password manager. You might have a DLP engine that you're using. But all of those things, when we start to rethink, do we really want to break and inspect more traffic? That's getting harder to do, by the way, for those network folks out there. Looking at the network used to be fun, right? We used to be able to break open packets and look at it. It was cool. We could see where people went. We could see the data that was going through. Today, we just can't. We have about 70% coverage today, because the rest of the 30%, you can't break it open, can't look at it because of TLS 1.3 and perfect forward secrecy and, the quick protocol and some new things that are happening that just don't allow, even with the private keys and with certificates and everything else, it doesn't allow us to see the traffic. So a lot of the solutions that we've kind of been relying on for the last 15 years, we just can't, and it's going to get even worse in the future. But the browser always sees the traffic, right? The browser has to see the traffic. It has to decrypt it, right? The browser is the A in the A to B conversation for public key encryption. So the point is that you've got control, kind of future-proofed for all of these applications, as they're developed, regardless of what cipher suites they're using or anything like that. So one of the things I wanted to share also with this password manager is the ability to share a common user account. Now, usually this is a no-no. You don't share passwords, in the corporate world, because there's no attribution back to the user, right? However, with our password manager that we've integrated here, we can share what might be a common corporate password, to something like Twitter in this case, or X, but don't allow the user to see the password, and don't allow the user to even grab the password. So as I go to insert, to get logged into Twitter here, notice the password gets inserted for me, but this was shared by the marketing team. And of course, I can't reveal the password. I can't see it. We're looking out for things like Burp Suite and Fiddler and these man-in-the-middle attacks, and we won't let those occur. So I'm able to log in securely, not at the DOM level, not at the document object model level like other password managers do, but at the network level. So I'm able to securely get in, and this is my only way to get into Twitter, right? So I'm compelled to be monitored and recorded. I might be compelled not to use the messages part of Twitter, right? Or, go change the password. Now that I'm in, I could go change the password, right? Well, no, we're going to block that page because the browser itself can make sure that you have guardrails around what you're doing, including going to sites maybe you're not supposed to go to. Like here's a gambling site. Maybe we send a warning, or we send, we can understand what these sites are, especially if they're phishing attempts, because this is how you stop phishing. Phishing, we've always tried to stop it in the email, right? We've always just bought better email scanners and those kind of things, but they still get through. You stop phishing where it actually happens, which is the browser. So if we see that a website is uncategorized and we've never seen this before, and you start putting a corporate email address into one of these unknown sites, we can stop them in their tracks and make sure that, we got to make sure we're doing the right thing here, or maybe send them to training, or say, hey, this looks completely suspicious, be super careful, or just block it altogether. I could have blocked that whole exercise altogether. So that's the power of having control of the input and the output, and of course, what appears on the screen as well. So, back here in Salesforce, I've got a whole section of data that I just made blurry. Well, why is it blurry? I can't read that. Well, that's the point. There's sensitive data in there, right? So if I wanted to reveal this, you can see that, yeah, of course, there was a credit card number. There's sensitive data. But we want to make sure that if we put this somewhere that we're not supposed to, that it doesn't work, right? So my personal Gmail, that's a no-no. We're not going to let that go. However, my corporate Gmail, if I go over here and paste it in, watch what happens to the screen. Because the moment that sensitive data shows up, well, now we've got this watermark going across the screen. So it looks a little obnoxious, but it's there for a reason. It's there if there's sensitive data to deter somebody from taking a picture with their camera phone. So we're not going to let that happen. And of course, we do have the ability to protect against screenshots on some operating systems as well. So for instance, if somebody gets a snipping tool in Windows, or if they're trying to broadcast it over Teams or Zoom or something like that, that data won't go over, because of those digital rights management capabilities within the browser. But that brings me back to kind of the network. And I really want to touch on this super quick. But I think what I want to do is show this to you on a different machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and pull up this other machine that I'm working on here, which is IGEL. All right. So hopefully you guys can see this. If you can't, please let me know. But this is my my IGEL screen. Now notice that I have IGEL running. I've branded this thing, my JT Marlin logo. That's why I love IGEL. You can customize everything about it. And of course, when I launch IGEL here, I'm going to get my my welcome screen. I'm going to go ahead and get logged in, and we can actually do this in real time. So I'm going to do JSON@trunk.1, and it's going to send me through a notification process. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say 98 yes on my phone here. Let's do 98 yes. Face ID. So this would be a real world experience, running Island on IGEL. So, if this was a first time usage, you might have to get through an acceptable usage policy, right? Maybe make the lawyers happy, hit the accept button. But notice that I'm back to my desktop. I'm back to exactly where I was. I have all my applications here. I have those notifications that I had a minute ago. Everything is ready for me here. Now, the network is also ready for me. So, for instance, if I wanted to get to something behind a firewall, like my Splunk instance, it just goes there. Now, even if I had Edge or Chrome or Chromium, on this machine, it would not be able to route me to this network. It's only because I'm logged in, authenticated, it knows who I am. And Island is using the Island network to get me there. So that's the reason I'm able to get there, is because of that private access capability. And of course, if I want to open up my Outlook, I've got this just automatically created a PWA for me. I didn't do anything. This could be a brand new, first time usage, which really this is what it is. It's my first time usage of Island, for that profile here. And here I've got that same experience that you just saw in the Windows environment. So it's truly, it's utilizing the local compute power of this machine that it's on. And a lot of times these machines are very thin client machines, the 4 gig of RAM or 8 gig of RAM or whatever it is. They're not really that beefy of a box, but those are good enough to run, the key applications that you need from an end user perspective, Teams and Zoom and and Outlook, and of course all of your normal web browsing. But you get the protections, and you get the robotic process automation, and you get the password manager, and all of the things, the secure browsing. We've built in SMB file shares, all of those features just built into that one platform. Now, of course, because it's IGEL, you can have this auto start. You can have it be the only thing on the desktop. You can have it go right into it. Obviously, about all the full configuration capabilities of this operating system. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause and turn it back over to, I guess, either Christian or the moderator. And I think we might have time for Q&A. Is that right, Brian?
Absolutely, Jason. Actually, one of the questions that came in, they want to know what microphone you're using. So obviously you got some props on that. So you can be sure to share that out. But
this is, I don't know if this is some sort of Electro voice or something like that, but yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you there. Also too with Christian, I guess one of the things, what kind of industries do you see really, attracted to the Island, or is there any specific verticals that you feel like is really compelling right now with some of the challenges they're facing?
Getting a lot of traction in healthcare. Healthcare, obviously a big user of thin clients as well. iGel's huge in healthcare. And it's because they need to have the flexibility of, like, first they're on the 6th floor, and then the clinician goes down to the 2nd floor and goes to the 3rd floor. And VDI was kind of the de facto solution, because they had the ability to restore the session, get you right back to where you were with persistency. Well, we've done the same thing with Island now. So if you badge back in with your Imprivata badge or AuthX back into Island, we actually put all the applications that you had running on the 6th floor on the new machine you logged in on the 3rd floor. So all those apps come back to life, and they're back to where they were. Plus, it's faster. Usually on average, it's about a 40-second login for most VDI. With Island, it's about an 8-second login, because it's just running natively. It's faster. It's browser tech. We're not streaming pixels. It's just a better experience overall. So I'd say healthcare, banking is big, retail is big as well, hospitality, just all kinds of industries.
Outstanding. Also, too, there's a couple other questions here. Stephen, what does Island and Epic Hyperdrive stand with being fully supported? Where does it stand?
Yeah, well, we got some really great news there. Obviously, we're working very closely with Epic. We are a standard now for Epic. I just got an update myself on some of the progress we're making with Epic, but we're working at the highest levels, in Wisconsin with that team, and we basically, we are now part of the standard for a certified client to run Epic Hyperdrive.
Outstanding. This question is going to go to Christian. Imprivata integration with Island on IGEL.
I'll actually ask Jason on that one, because I
Yeah.
was trying to figure that one out. Because I know I've been working with Chris Feeney and Jason Maffera over on the Imprivata integrations around every other technologies, but with Island specifically, I haven't gotten an update yet. So Jason, if you have anything there, that'd be great.
Yeah, listen, I was just on with a prospect, one of the hospital systems this week, and I think they were saying that they're still having a little trouble with Imprivata on OS 12 for some reason, but I think they were optimistic that was almost done. So I know it's supported. It's quicker. I guess it's quicker in OS 11 than it was in OS 12. But I think they're still working through some of those issues. I don't expect that to last much longer. Probably another month or so should be fine.
Awesome. Yeah,
One
Michael,
of the
I'll get
things
some information around that just with the folks over at the IGEL team, just working with them strategically on that stuff.
Absolutely. And obviously, we ask that each of you, like I said, to complete the survey. We'd love to get a chance to schedule a time to actually unpack, whether it's with Jason and that team or also to the IGEL team about what your circumstance. But also, too, I wanted to call out Christian, why don't you tell them a little bit about your office hours? And that's kind of a new concept we started with one of our solution architects around Nutanix, but kind of share a little bit about and when's the next one scheduled?
Yeah, so next one's going to be, I believe, in October. Let me get the dates for that. October, I'm sorry, September 12th. So I typically will do about an office hour for about an hour long. I'll focus around technology, a technology alliance partner from that perspective. So last one I did a little bit of island and best practices. Next one will probably be around some of the Imprivata integrations and also how to do best construct thought processes around automation with deployment. So every month I'll change it up a little bit, but yeah, definitely if you guys would join, I had a couple of customers and previous customers join on that one. So it's been a great time to sit down with everybody.
Absolutely. So I think Elliot put that in the chat. So like I said, that link and also too, we'll be marketing that out. So we appreciate each of you and we appreciate your time. We love bringing emerging technologies. Like I said, these aren't bleeding edge. These are leading edge. These are proven technologies. Jason, thank you for walking us through what you guys are doing and the impact that you're having for customers. We're excited. A lot of people are trying to get out of just the app and desktop world. And so much of us, what we're doing and where we're going is around SaaS apps or the browser. And so you guys are leading the way. So we appreciate the opportunity. So Christian and I and the choice team, we look forward to continuing this discussion. So please submit the survey. We'd love to schedule a time, maybe 15, 20 minutes just to learn more, unpack this and see, like I said, where we can come alongside you and how we can help support and guide. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you for your partnership and thank you for your time. Have a great day.